Hello. Okay, so a while ago I uploaded a video about JWT secured APIs based on the Neon 3 framework. Now things have progressed quite substantially meanwhile, so this is a little update. It's going to make lives very much well, simpler. So let's start by basically having a complete fresh start. So what you see here is I run a local XAMPP server on my Windows machine. It's a completely empty directory. I have set up a database called db-app, which is equally completely empty. And as you can see here in my PHP store, I'm in a completely empty folder. So we're going to start from scratch and basically see how convenient things can go. So I will probably talk more than I actually code, because that's actually a relatively straightforward system here. So I assume that you have the newest version of Neon 3. So I'm using version I guess 2.11. So let's start with creating a new app here. So by the way, if you don't have that installed, go to install it with npm and it's called Neon 3-CLI, and make sure to install it globally so you can use the Neon 3 name in the path. So let's say new app, and I'm going to call this Neon 3 videos. It's exactly the directory that I'm in. And as a little reminder, so what this does, why I even need the app, this is something that you might want to remember when you actually deploy to a live system, where it's pretty likely that, that's the only thing that runs on your server. That, like you have one domain with one project. Then what you want to do when you deploy, you want to go in the htaccess and basically change that accordingly. So let's see where we're at. So this is what I'm talking about here. So should I deploy? Where's my htaccess here? So for that being in the web root, I would simply get rid of this part, and that should be the rest of it. And then, I can force my SSL and stuff like that. The rest should be pretty set though. So as you can see, just a little reminder, here are the, the Neon 3 structures. We've got our components, our frames, our model, and, well, here already we have like stuff pre-installed that we need. Those are mainly Neon 3 apps. Yeah, thought so. We've got the index model installed that ships with Neon itself. And we've got the demo frame. So let's actually see. We should be able to, yep. So this is simply running the demo frame for now, and it's pretty ugly, but basically tells you, okay, this is the stuff you have installed, and points you to the documentation that frankly needs a lot of work. But let's basically start with what we want to do. So the first principle that I would like to show you is basically how simple API endpoints are generated in general. So I'm going to create a new component, and I'm going to call this component register. Oops, put my Neon 3 here. Okay, so it's going to ask me what kind of component I want to create. In that case, I only want to create an API, so I'm going to use this, and I'm going to use the demo frame for lack of having anything else here. So let's look into the components that we created right now. So we created register. Now, just a little reminder, the routing in Neon 3 is basically taken care for us already. So for an API, let's say, well, let's do get register as an example. So let me simply return the body here. And then what I do, and I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger so you can basically see the URL a little bit better. So I can now simply say api.v1 and register. So since I'm doing this in a browser, this will be a get call. authenticate sum equals value. And as you can see, this basically takes care of the complete response. So in that case, I'm simply returning what I get back. So there are different things I'm going to do. So basically, as you can see, it automatically makes it a JSON object, so that should all be fine. And just a little reminder of how access control is handled in general. So what I can also do is I can say throw new route exception, unauthorized, let's say 401, and basically, like, you can't see that now, but the header would be, or actually let's do that. Let's do that. And as you can see, I get a status code of 401 unauthorized. Right, so my application can act accordingly. And as you can see, nothing else happens. So this is basically the core principle of how an API endpoint works. Needless to say, if I were to put, you know, a post register or a delete register and so on, like that would all be the HTTP methods. So again, we have register. So I just, you know, start with method and then repeat the name of the class in that case, which is the endpoint itself. Okay, so what do we want to do? We probably don't want to have a get register at all. What we do want to do is we would first of all like to get a couple of prerequisites taken care of. So what I want to have is composer require, and then it's going to be Neon3 apps stateless, which basically is a bundle that installs a couple of apps itself. It requires Firebase JWT, it requires the Neon3 apps JWT, and basically then the stateless handling. And you can see that. It's going to take a while. Okay, fine. So we got that. So what we also want for this case is we basically want to have a basic user model. So this is something that isn't packaged yet on packages. So we're going to do this over Neon3 add model, and we're going to call it model user, and it's at, and I'm going to provide those links below, https github.com neon3 user model.git. This is the endpoint. So what this command does, by the way, this would install in a particular directory. So as you can see, like I have my regular vendor folder. My models, however, I would like to see here, which, oops. So type in the package name, okay. Yeah. Which apparently isn't the case. So let me quickly look up how that package is actually called. Okay. So let's try that again. First of all, let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this just to have it nice and clean and pretend that never happened. Okay, so where's our problem? that is not the correct name. The name is Neon 3 model user. Okay, so this is the name of later when we get into publication and so on. This is the name you gave a particular package in its composer. So that should be fine now. Let's try that one out. By the way, what we see here is basically composer's response. Okay, that looks better, and yeah, that looks way better. Okay, so, and you can see we have now a model user. So what does the model entail? The model itself is, let me make some space here for you. Okay, so the model itself basically uses the transformer. This is a basically relatively new concept. So what we see here is the actual description of how the database should behave. And let's ignore those for now. Those are unique values, but here's the model structure itself. Now the model structure returns an array with basically the format that I want the model to be in. And a migrate JSON that would basically tell me, okay, this is the database structure that we require. So we can see we have 4 tables. We're going to install those tables now. So what we're going to do is we're going to say Neon 3 migrate models up. So what this will do is it's going to take this migrate JSON and compare it against the database and make changes accordingly. This is DB app, and that is okay. If you don't have any kind of credentials saved on a Neon 3 CLI, it will ask you to do so. That's what it asks me, like whether or not like those are the saved credentials. Is that the database I want to perform the action against? Yes, I want. So we created 5 queries, which basically means my database should now have, if I do that one, yep, 5 tables. So I've got the user, user email, user password, user profile, and user role. I will not worry so much about user profile and user role today. But the user is the actual user, and the emails, and this is something we can see nicely here. So the where's my email? Emails, this is a many relation, so I can have multiple emails put into one account. The password is just like one active password, and it's also hidden on read. So we will not see that in the usual read of the user model. Now there would be a lot to be said about like how this transformer works. For now, I'm gonna basically just take it as it is and use the register function accordingly. So the only thing that why this even matters is because we need to make it possible for the for the API to have the right predictions of how the model is going to look like. So what we want to do first, as we're going to do database operations, is in our demo, we want to make sure that we do have a, oops, that is not what I meant. I meant in the frame demo. So that's the frame we're executing, and it's currently not doing much. So I basically want to say I want it to load. Whenever you're executed, do me a favor and do your thing, but then also load the database, right? Whoops, I want to include that. Okay, so what my IDE does, by the way, is it automatically, you can see it added this use. You can use the full name, full qualified namespace if you want to, but I find that is a little bit nicer. And then I need to place my environment variables in there. So since I'm running on localhost, there's not so much I need. And probably what I want to do here is the following. I want to set up a couple of credentials. Okay, so you can see on the same server there are already a couple of things I'm running. In my case, I want to say create new, and I'm going to say N3 video. So that's how my app is prefixed for now. DB for database. Okay, so I want to create a new, and then the name of the property here would be name. That would be the name of my database, and the value is DB app. And I want to create another one, and the name of the property would be assumes UUID, and the value of that is true. So those are from the DB app. I'm also going to include a link in there, or actually maybe quickly show you. Neon 3. Oh, there's so much stuff. Hold on. DB. Sure. Yep, there we go. So where are we? Here. Here you basically see all the various forms of variables I can place in there. So this is, if you're using defines, you need the DB underscore prefix. You know, if you want to have global constants. If that's not what you want to do, you basically simply start here. So the host, you know, it's automatically localhost. Name is the name of your database. The user defaults to root, and so on. So in my case, the only thing I really need is the name of the database, and that we're using unique IDs rather than auto-incremented IDs. That is all we need. And hence, over here, this is all I need at this point. Now, I also installed the stateless, which I already know requires a secret. So while I'm here, let's create that as well. So I'm going to do exit and say on the higher level, I want to create a N3 video. Stateless. Okay, and I'm going to create a secret, and it actually doesn't matter. That'll do. Okay, save and exit. So what does this in reality do? In reality, this stores credentials in a JSON outside of your web root, or at least if you're not like more than 2 levels down in the web root. So let's be more precise. We're going 2 levels outside of the current environment. So assuming that, you know, like on a while you're like in var www htdocs, for example, then it would be on the var level, and therefore be inaccessible from the web. If you have a different setup, I mean, consider that. But we in our case are absolutely fine with that. So let's actually get those credentials. And there's a global function that expects the regular behavior. We basically say get credentials, and this has an unhandled exception, but we're good with that. We actually want this to fail if the exception. That's fine. Let it throw an error. And then here we can now say, okay, so this is credentials, and then N3 video DB. That's all we need to do here. And since we already know that we want to create the stateless, so stateless set secret, and that's going to be my credentials N3 video stateless, and here I really need exactly only the secret. So to be honest, I'm not sure if I called it video or videos. Let me actually verify that. quickly. I'm very forgetful. And it's called video. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So I should be good. Let me quickly see if it throws any kind of errors here. Okay, method get is not supported. Yes, we deleted that from the register already. That is fine. But otherwise we seem to look all set up. So we've got our database installed. We've got our credentials basically set up. So we could, in theory, make calls now to this endpoint and register a user. So let's try this out. So let's assume the register endpoint accepts a user model, and we're going to say create. Now I can either use the declaration directly. So this is safe. This is safe, and if it doesn't come in nicely, then that'll be fine. It'll simply basically throw an error. But I mean, to make life easier, let's do the following and basically assume that what we would normally do is oh, and by the way, so what this also does, maybe we should look at this a little bit closer. So if I look at the transformer of the user, I will see that, for example, when a user is created, then the username on creation checks whether or not the username is unique, and if not, throws an exception. And the same goes for emails and so on. So from the outside, there's really nothing I need to worry about. This either works or it doesn't. I just have to catch the error and respond accordingly. So, but what we want to do for now is we want to, well, actually there's not much we want to do. Let us actually do the following and say, where did I save the Postman? There we go. And say we're going to create this. So as you can see, I tested this before. So I create a username, a password, and then one email. So there are two ways of going about this. This is probably when you think about, like, wait, how would my front end look like? So this makes sense if you get the user back, which in this case already happened. And then you say, like, okay, so we're going to pass it always in the format that we receive it. As you can see, like, emails is an array with emails and so on. Again, the password is protected, that's why I don't see it right now. And this is a possibility to basically simply directly pass those kind of objects back and forth. This makes life easier in the long run. If you say, like, okay, if I make updates, I can basically treat my entities as mutable. So let's assume you get an information into the front end and you just manipulate it and send it back with an update. And everything is exactly the format that you want it to be. However, what you can also do is, of course, you can assign accordingly. So you could, for example, say something like, okay, new user equals, and then basically you say, I don't know, right, whatever you need. Username is then the body. Oh, oops. What we get in the body, let's assume user. And then emails, is that called emails? Emails, yep. Emails, and then we know that needs to be an array with email. Just assume that this is directly body email. And what is another minimum requirement? And by the way, you can see this is all, like, is it required? Here are the required fields and so on, right? So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this right now. This is more a quick, how do I get it started? And then the password would be something like password, and then body password, right? So in that case, I could basically say, like, okay, I'm going to send user, email, and password over for registration, and don't have to worry about the structure of the actual model. But again, if you actually work with that, you will notice that that this approach does make sense, because you don't have to repeat, like you can basically just infer the same kind of model logic on the front end. And it seems a little bit counterintuitive at the beginning, but you will notice that your production speed greatly increases if you don't work like that, but basically directly say like, yes, my models on the front end look exactly like they do on the back end. Okay, so let's directly return this. So normally I would basically say, well, let's, put a try, or actually, you know what, let's do that. Let's be clean. So what you would do is something like this, maybe, right? And then you say catch exception E, and then we basically just say return route exception. And you know what? The message is simply going to be this, and it's bad data. Okay. Okay. And yeah, that's all we need to do. So let's do that and see if we can register. So, and we also have to memorize that. So my username would be, yeah, that's fine. My password is sometimes, and some3 email. Okay. So let's send that. So just one more thing. So in a real life scenario, what you would probably want to do, as you can see here in or actually let's just send this. Okay, now I've got a new user created. What you would normally do is you can see that the confirm date of that email, for example, is null. So in a real life scenario, I would use this confirm code, right? And probably say something like send confirmation, and then I can basically just say user emails 0 email, right? And then basically, yeah, you get the point. So by the way, please don't use the onboard mail, but you get the idea. So now you can basically verify that, and depending on your application, you could basically block a user until that is done, or restrict particular things from happening, and stuff like that. We're in a local system, so I'm simply going to trust what we're doing here. So this is now our user. Okay, so that is great. Let me verify that the database agrees, and just open up that one, and we can see now we have a user. It's Neon2, and that user has a hash password, and everything seems to be fine. Okay, so next thing we probably want to do is, okay, now we have registered a user. How about letting that user log in and authenticate? Let's do that and basically say, okay, well, actually let's first do something else, and let's first say, okay, we're gonna have a let me get the mouse up there, Neon3 new component, and it's gonna call it restricted endpoint. By the way, note how I write this in camel case here. I'll show you in a second why I want to make that example. And that's also an API endpoint, and we're also going to use demo. Okay, so first time, so get restricted endpoint. Let's say that's what we want to do. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say this is stateless restricted, and basically I don't need anything here. Or do I need something here? No, why is this? Oh, unhandled route exception. No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Okay. So let's do that one. and see what happens if I basically visit this. So let me basically just duplicate that tab and say we want to have a get, and we're going to say restricted. And here what I'm doing now is I'm going to hyphenate that and say endpoint. Okay, so let's just send that over and see what's happening. Restricted endpoint, and probably have a typo in here. Restricted endpoint get. Restricted endpoint. Why not? Did I really do that wrong? Indeed, I did that wrong. So that is not true for the API. Sorry, I mixed it up with the regular routing. So the request is empty because we need something. Okay, let's ignore this one for now and say you don't need something. Okay, and then I get the error unauthorized. So basically, I do not send authentication with me, and that's why this doesn't work. So let's just assume that otherwise, return secret info. You are in. Okay, so again, will not let me do it. So I need to authenticate myself somehow. So let's create a authentication. So in that case, we're going to say neon3 new component login. It's also going to be an API endpoint. Also going to use demo. Oh, already done. Forget how fast that works. And so that needs to be a post, of course. Okay. So here we basically get some credentials. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to verify that we can log in. So let's basically close everything else. And say user model login, and then it says credentials. Now let me see what we need here. Okay, we need an email or username. Okay, got it. Okay, understand. So maybe interesting to know here is that, so the transformer that we looked at, that's a, like creates a call static. Should I have additional functionality in my model so it will execute those functions accordingly? So what we want right now is basically we just need a username and a password. That is that simple. Okay, so let's do that. And what is our return value is either an exception or the user. Okay, this is as easy as it gets. So this is literally the only thing I'm doing here. Wonderful. And yes, you may throw that exception. Okay, so why is this? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Let's try that out and say, okay, so we have a, actually let's leave this open and give us a new one and say, actually duplicate tab and then do post, and we're going to say login and go to our first tab and see what did we send over. So our username is neon2. All right, Oh, that's convenient. Wait, where are we here? Login. So still a post. And the body is neat. Oh, this is all still the same. Perfect. So in that case, this doesn't, and this doesn't happen at all. Okay. And we sent that to login. So we have our username and our password, and that should be all we need to do. Let's send it and see what's happening. Yep. So what do we get here? The user. And now we actually forgot something. We don't want to return the user. That doesn't really make any kind of sense. What we do want to do is we want to see whether or not that works. And say, okay, try. Okay. We're only going to catch the regular exception. And basically say, no, this works either way. No, we can simply let it through. Actually, that is simply fine. If that doesn't work, everything else is already taken care of for us. So what we do want to do though is, if that works, we want to say, okay, so what is the JWT, right? And we want to say stateless assign, and then we're simply going to say, okay, we're going to identify this user by ID. The scope is something I can basically set to, you know, account for various permissions and so on. I'm actually going to do that based on the database. So let me just see if I have any kind of identifier. Yes, user type could be user, seller, or admin. Okay. Let me quickly see what the default is. Null. Okay. Well, then not. Then let's just step over that and assume user for now. Okay. And then we basically return. And let's return both. Oops. Let's return both and say user is user. Maybe I want that in my front-end application already. And auth is our JWT. Actually, let's call it token. Okay. All right, let's try that out and send that over. Perfect. And I can see that I get my whole user model out and I have this magical token here. So do you remember how this, where were we? The restricted endpoint, that was that a post? I think we changed that for no reason. Restricted endpoint, no, that was a get. So if I switch this to get and basically hit send, I have still the unauthorized problem. So why is that? Well, in my front-end application, in the header, I of course need to send a token over. So that's in that case, a bearer token. And if I do that and say bearer token, and I'm not sure if that automatically did it, but I'm basically going to copy and paste just to be sure, and hit the same thing, then I can see now I'm authenticated and basically get through this wall and get to my secret info. So this is how simple implementation works, and that's actually pretty awesome. That I'm completely done now with securing my application and can basically rely on this simple restrict thing. So I can also basically say like, okay, this is restricted for user, in which case this would still work. But if I were to say like, no, this is actually an endpoint that is super for admin, which is a scope that I'm not part of, and then it would basically tell me access denied. And by the way, this takes an array or a string, same for assignments, so I can have multiple roles. So in my login, where I just put in user, I can basically say there could be multiple roles, and I think the user model, yes. So this is accounted for, so Your role management system could be relatively complex depending on how you want to handle that. One last question probably is, so now we have the decoded. That's actually something we probably want to see. So let's actually read the decoded information here and return that, so we have a better understanding of what's happening here. Whoops, put that back to user. So as you can see, I have basically, this is the decoded JWT as it comes, and the JSON token identifier, JTI, is in my case equal to the user ID, because that's what I throw in as an identifier, as you remember. So if we go back to wherever we see our user, you can basically see this ID is exactly what we will find here, which basically means that in my backend application, I can of course now basically do something like, let's return the user, for example, and say, whoops, and my computer froze. Okay, user model get, and then I simply say JWT, JSON token identifier, and see what happens then. And you see I basically get the current user out. So that's pretty interesting, and makes life very, very easy when it comes to application development. And as you can probably see, I skipped over a lot of necessary steps, like why is that so convenient, for example, to work with the model, like how does this even automatically work and insert and so on. So the whole transactions, the routing and so on, all of that is automated for you without being restrictive. So there's no way, if you watched the older videos, you noticed that I can do a lot of those things manually if I wanted to. But the question, of course, is why. And that's probably not a rhetorical question. There are cases where you want to have more control over what's happening, but when it comes to regular CRUD operations and security and so on, it's nice to have something you can simply use without having a bigger issue of whatever. Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there would be so much more to say, but I want to keep this relatively short. Hope you enjoy it and have fun developing.